Speaker today and moderator as well, Dr. Manoj Shah. He's the Associate Professor and ex-Chief of Pediatric Gastroenterology and Nutrition. He's also a Medical Director at Pediatric GI Endocrine Lab at Loma Linda University School of Medicine, California. He's also President at Inland Social Care Organization of Physicians of Indian Origin, and he's the Deputy Editor for Journal of API. So please welcome him, and he will be talking. I'm playing two headsets.
Good morning, everybody. And I hope everybody had their breakfast and then morning walk.
You can spoil it now.
I had actually walked a couple of times because I didn't know what was there, where was breakfast, where was CME. So it took a little while to get things done. Maybe it may be easier if, no, that's fine. I can keep looking at some other places too. So I will go ahead and quickly talk about wheat-related medical problems. What is the spectrum of wheat-related problems? Because right now it's in vogue in a way if you want to think about it, but it's not that. The wheat had been an issue for a while, and everybody thinks about wheat as wheat problem is problem related to the gluten. But there are a lot of other things in wheat that may be the issue. So we'll go over real quick about few of these issues that can be seen in patients with problem with wheat. So first one is, what is the importance of wheat? You know, wheat is a very high yield crop. It means that for the agriculture it is very important that you make a lot of wheat from a small land, and it can be adapted to different climates. Wheat is grown in many different parts of the world. There are more than 25,000 varieties of wheat right now, but there are mainly two types of wheat. Those two types depend on genome of the wheat, composition of the grain, whether it is small or large, whether it is hard or soft, and end use. End use means what is the purpose of use of that wheat. So there are two main types of wheat that people use. One is for the pasta and macaroni and all those stuff. There is actually durum wheat, and the second one is the common wheat that we use for bread and flour, and those are actually hexaploid wheat. It is the most common source of energy for humans all over the world. There are many health benefits of wheat, but there are also a lot of kind of concerns with that. So if you know, the wheat started about 10,000 years ago being kind of grown in the fertile actually crescent of the Middle East. The end point of that was Iran, and then it slowly moved from Iran to Afghanistan to India. And right now, if you look, wheat actually producers in the world, China is number one and number two is India, and then Russia, France, and our state here right now, United States. So the wheat started 10,000 years ago. At that time, started to be domesticated wheat in a way that people started to grow wheat, and around 1790, 1800, there were separate breeding of this wheat. We know that from some literature in England. And then suddenly there was boom of different type of wheats after 1900. And especially those who were in India around our time, 1960s, 1970s, there were Haryali Kranti, Green Revolution, that came because of the wheat. The wheat started to be grown in multiple areas, but it kind of started to grow a large amount in a small land. And after 1980s, there are different types of wheat that is coming, and we'll talk about those because after 2000, with the gene splicing, different types of wheat have actually come in, and that's mainly to make wheat either more used for either bread or for pasta. So if you just look on the top, wheat, the original wheat, the wild wheat is einkorn wheat that had 7 pairs of chromosomes, 14 chromosomes total. And then there was white, if you want to say, some kind of genomic hybrid. So if you think the wild wheat as AA, then other wheat was BB wheat. So those two are actually some kind of hybrid that became tetraploid, or four sets of chromosomes that become 28 chromosomes. That's a common wheat that we use for macaroni and pasta. That's the durum wheat. But then that durum wheat, that's 28 chromosomes, got by the genetic manipulation, went into making 42 chromosomes, 3 pairs of 7 chromosomes each. That hexaploid, that's the one that commonly used for bread. And during this kind of transition, some of the part of the wheat became more antigenic. That's all I want you to understand, because we cannot go into detail of molecular genetics. But some part of wheat became more antigenic, and that caused more problems. So if you look, why did these genetic things came up? Is that while wheat, if you think about first on the left, it was very brittle. There were not too many wheat grain will stay in the corn. So when they started having domestication of this wheat, it started to become more stable in the husk. So, but then when they made genetic manipulation, it became more amount of wheat. You can see that from small number it became a bigger number. And that's where the things kind of started. And this all is also how hard or easy it is to dehusk the wheat, so that you don't have to remove the top layer of the wheat, because that's where the bran or the fiber is. To remove that, to make it easy, you just thresh the wheat and grains will come out. So that's the another advantage of this. So I just want you to focus only on one thing. This is just again the actual genetic part of the wheat, but the one that is in the middle says Khapli, Khapli. Khapli is an Indian wheat that is still wild icon wheat. It is still it is still grown in India, some part of India, not all, but that's the wheat that is very different and that is less antigenic if you have to think about it, because it has not been genetically manipulated. So what is in the wheat that cause problem? Or maybe what is not in the wheat that may cause the problem? So wheat contains all carbohydrate, protein, fat, fiber, vitamins, minerals, additives and contaminants that can be added during the phase of the growing of wheat. So any of these could cause the problem. So if you just look, wheat kernel, if you look, there are mainly 3 parts. The outer part is the bran, or the fiber part. The main part is the endosperm, and that one smaller part is the endosperm, where the germ is. So the importance of it is, as we talked about, energy. So I have just highlighted some. Carbohydrate is 72.6 gram out of 100 gram of wheat, and it gives 340 calories. So we all know 3.4 calories per gram of carbohydrate wheat gives that. So that's an important source of calories. Other source is it is source of the protein, and fat is not as much, it is low fat. So what are wheat kind of related medical problems? So first one is autoimmune disorders. If you just think about it as a big group, celiac disease, everybody knows, dermatitis herpetiformis, skin disease, ataxia, these 3 top are studied the most, let me tell you that. Those are the 3 known. The other part, there are reports, small case series, things of one is rheumatoid arthritis, other is Hashimoto thyroiditis, IgA associated nephropathy, diabetes mellitus type 1. Those who are in pediatrics, they know all diabetes mellitus type 1 patients, they are screened for celiac disease. It is very high incidence of celiac in those patients who have diabetes mellitus type 1. So my 1/3 of the patients for celiac disease come from the diabetes clinic. They screen everybody, their antibodies positive, they send it to GI to diagnose and then treat that celiac disease. So it is not uncommon at all. And diabetes mellitus type 1 in pediatric is an autoimmune disorder. We see antibodies in those. The next is inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, Addison's disease. Anybody knows Addison's disease? The person with the most famous person with Addison's disease? John F. Kennedy. He had Addison's disease, and we think he had celiac disease that was missed, because all his symptoms, if you look how he died, and that shows that he had most likely celiac disease that was missed. And celiac disease is common in Irish people, so that was another thing. The other part that are not autoimmune related problem is irritable bowel syndrome, and other is dysbiosis of GI tract. dysbiosis is different bacteria in the GI tract. There are other kind of medical problems that are not autoimmune. The one is allergy. There's allergic dermatitis, food allergy to wheat. This is food allergy. This is not autoimmune problem. Baker's asthma, that is more common in England than anywhere else. It's the second most common of exposure kind of induced asthma. The one that I have not seen yet is WDEIA, wheat dependent exercise induced anaphylaxis. It is very severe problem. Obesity has been reported, diabetes mellitus type 2. It is also considered trigger for migraine, and in pediatric also autism. There is no proof that wheat is cause of autism, but some of the symptoms, or especially the behavior in the child, especially aggressive behavior child in autism gets better if they are put on wheat-free diet. So all these problems people always think come from wheat proteins. Those are gliadin and the glutenin that makes the gluten. It is the most important part of the wheat protein. It's about 80% of the wheat protein is the gluten. The other 20%, some is albumin, globulin, and now we know lectin or wheat germ actually associated with glutenin. That's a very small amount, but that may be more important one. So what is gluten? So if you look at the gluten is made up of two parts. One is the gliadin, other one is the glutenin. When they are combined, and if you add water to it, then it makes sulfide bonds that joins these two, and if there is yeast or that makes gas like carbon dioxide or something, it will rise. So this is the main theory how to make bread, is when you add water to this flour that contains gluten and gliadin, then it will rise, and that's where the bread is made. So these bonds are elastic. They will stretch the dough, and more you stretch the dough, it means those who are helping their wives in kitchen, they know when they try to make the dough from the flour, rotli no, the bhakri no, the rot, you have to do it differently. Why is that? Is to how much it will rise. More you stretch the bread, and more you stretch the dough, it will rise more. રોટલી બનાવી હોય તો વધારે રોટ એનો એટલો વંદાને ખબર છે, રાઈટ? આઈ હેલ્પ પર આઉટ સમ ટાઈમ ડુ એક એક આવે નહીં, હવે તું કર થોડું કરી આવું, થોડું વધારે જરાશે છે. And so that's the way this works. So main thing you have to remember is three things: autoimmune, allergic, or non-autoimmune, non-allergic problem to the gluten. So autoimmune problem, we talk about celiac disease, dermatitis herpetiformis and ataxia. Allergic problem or food allergy, WDEIA, asthma, and contact acute dermatitis. The one that we don't understand much is the gluten sensitive people. It means that they have some actual symptoms that get better if you take them off the gluten. So celiac disease, an autoimmune condition, occurs only in those who have certain type of genetic susceptibility, and that is related to HLA. They have, and it is a very unique autoimmune disorder because we know what kind of the trigger it is. It is actually the gluten that triggers this autoimmune reaction. But then if you remove that trigger, the autoimmunity goes away. It is very important to know there is no other autoimmune disease we know what the trigger is, or if you take the trigger away, disease doesn't get better. Rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto thyroiditis, all those we don't know exactly what the trigger is, and if you remove the trigger even then the autoimmunity persists. So this is the only disease where it can be cured if you take them off the gluten. Celiac disease is common worldwide. Even in India, there is one in 100 in northern India, Punjab, and I took my MD in pediatrics before I came here, and we used to see celiac disease in Punjabis in India. It is not uncommon problem there. But if you go to south, it is 10 times less common in actually southern India. So southern India, less common celiac disease compared to northern. So how does celiac disease happen? You need three things. One thing is genetics. It means you need certain genes to develop disease. Second thing, you need exposure to the gluten. And third thing, something else has to be there. And we don't know what else it could be. It could be feeding problem, infections, change in the microbiome of GI tract, but all those combined in certain stars kind of situation, then you develop celiac disease. So I'm going to skip this real quick. The genes are HLA, DQ2 and DQ8. And why I have put that? Because those are now available as a kind of routine testing. So celiac disease happens because epithelium of the intestine, which has very tight spaces between the cells, it becomes a little bit porous and then allows gliadin.
Lower line. Last line.
So, so once this kind of gluten molecule goes into the through the cells, in between the cells, then it develops cytokine reaction, inflammatory reaction, and that causes venous atrophy. So everybody knows how the disease is diagnosed. It's not going forward. So, diagnosis is based on three things: symptoms, second thing is laboratory testing, and third is biopsy of intestine. And I will show you some real quick things, but we'll go over really quick on that. Symptoms are abdominal pain, diarrhea, but more important is weight loss or failure to thrive in child. The other are constipation, abdominal distension, bloating, and diagnosis is based on serologic test. So these are the most famous people you might know have the gluten problem. You know, one of them is John Kennedy, the first picture, but second is Bill Clinton, and then who? Hillary or Chelsea? Chelsea. Hillary is different in the kind of Clinton group. Okay, so she is not the one. Chelsea has the problem, and then I think today is the match for the famous tennis player, right? Djokovic. He has gluten problem, and he says that after removing gluten from his diet, he has been on the peak performer in his actual tennis. And Drew Brees, those who are NFL kind of followers, so we are going to say serologic tests are antibody test for against the gliadin, tissue transglutaminase or TTG IgA, or endomysial antibodies. Out of all, endomysial antibodies the most specific. For celiac, it means if you have positive endomysial, you have definitely celiac disease. TTG is both specific but not as specific as EMA. And then you do genetics if you have to sometime, or endoscopy and small bowel biopsy. So I'm going to show you some endoscopy pictures. You can see on the top are the normal. So earlier, when I started my practice, it was all what we could see is the top left. You can see the folds in the small bowel. But now with high definition endoscopes, you can even see the villi. You can see the villi through the scope. So we can see that villi are regular and they are tall. While if you have celiac disease, it's the bottom line. You can see there is cobblestone, nodularity, folds are little effaced, and you can do capsule endoscopy to look even more detailed villi. You don't have to do biopsy. You can just see the villi. You can see even the hair-like projections, or we call it carpet-like thing. And in celiac disease, it will change to cobblestoning or cracks, fissuring in the mucosa. The diagnosis is made by seeing venous atrophy on small intestinal biopsy, because in the top left is the long, tall, slender villi. They become flat in the next one, and below that are the lymphocytes that secrete antibodies. Only treatment for celiac disease right now is the gluten-free diet. Gluten-free diet is strict gluten-free diet, 100% no gluten. Even small amount can cause the problem because it is the trigger antigen. It means even the small amount can trigger this autoimmune problem. The second one is dermatitis herpetiformis. You can see those are erythematous macules, urticaria type of papules. They have dense vesicles, severe itching, and it is throughout. but especially on the extensor aspects, most of them do not have any GI symptoms. So I see maybe once or twice a year patients referred from the dermatology for this problem. They are not as common in pediatric patients. But even though they don't have GI symptoms, if you do their intestinal biopsy, they have villus atrophy. The next one is gluten ataxia. Gluten ataxia is an autoimmune disorder affecting the cerebellum. And again, people have shown the antibody against not just the gluten but also the Purkinje cells, and that is not reversible. So once you develop cerebellar atrophy, it will be persistent. Again, the treatment is strict, actually gluten-free diet. The more important now is non-celiac gluten sensitivity, where symptoms of celiac disease are there, but they don't have any antibodies or they don't have small bowel villus atrophy. And symptoms get better without with the gluten restriction. So it may be associated with other parts of the wheat, not the gluten, that we'll talk about real quick now. So what are the other proteins other than the gluten that we said 20% other one? So one more important one is ATIs, amylase trypsin inhibitor. They are there in the wheat corn to prevent bacteria, yeast, everything else infecting the wheat itself. So they are there to protect the wheat itself. But then it can cause damage in the intestine or GI tract. How does that do that? Is these ATIs make those spaces between the epithelial cells wider. We talked about how the gluten was the problem, that it may be that ATIs start the process of making the spaces wider that allows the gluten to then enter. But there are other specific problems that we see, and most important is the allergies. You know, wheat-related allergy problems. Allergies are IgE mediated, while villus atrophy and those are IgA mediated. So IgE mediated problems we think are from ATIs. They are not from actually gluten. So ATIs make, we talked about celiac disease. The second thing is the allergy that we talked about before, just quickly, was the Baker's asthma and IgE-dependent dermatitis. The one that is now starting to show up more is the actually lectin, and that one is less than 3% in the wheat actually protein. But if you look lectin as a whole, lectin is considered anti-nutritional and toxic, especially it's an antigen that was the problem. So now we think that some of these problems that we see that are not related to gluten but related to wheat are related to lectin. And again, it increases intestinal permeability. Its main use, if you think, is to label the cell because it will bind to the carbohydrate moiety of the cell wall. So you can kind of label all these cells to look for fibrosis, scars and other stuff, but it can be used as a carrier to deliver the drug. You can just attach that to any oral drug and it will bypass the stomach and will go in the intestine where it can be absorbed. So most of use of lectin right now is for drug delivery. But it can stimulate HLA antigens and therefore it can cause some other problem. Now these antigens are not just in the wheat but also in the pancreatic islet, that where diabetes come in the thyroid cells, that where Hashimoto thyroiditis come in, it may be in the kidney basement membrane, that's where IgA associated actually nephropathy come in. So these all can be related to lectin and not the gluten. So testing them for the gluten is not good when they have this problem. We don't have taste for all these other right now. You know, the most common lectin that people know is ricin. Ricin is the nerve gas that people know. So even in small amount, it may be very toxic. It is a different type of lectin, not the same as WGA. The last one is carbohydrates. In wheat that can cause problem. So wheat has about 85% carbohydrate. We said that wheat is important source of energy and most of it is starch. So when you look at the starch, amylose, amylopectin combined, but there is very small amount that is resistant starch, and that may be the one causing the problem. Resistant starch means it will not, it is not going to be digested, and therefore it goes in the colon where it gets fermented. That causes all the GI symptoms of bloating, diarrhea, actually dyspepsia, all those because of that starch that is not digested. I'm going to skip this lot of other things. The last one is the fiber. We know the whole grain or whole wheat has fiber. So fiber is in an outer layer. So during the process of milling, making flour from wheat, that part is removed. So when you can actually use the wheat flour compared to wheat grain, difference is that fiber. And fiber is very important because it will slow down the motility in the stomach. It will allow you to have some time to digest wheat, but at the same time, it can interfere with absorption of trace elements, calcium, manganese, magnesium, all that can be decreased absorption, and therefore it can have effect. Now, also it all depends on how you make the flour. If you make it an old Indian style, chakki, ganti, that does not create too much high temperature, and therefore it actually maintains protein structure good. While if you do in milling, the steel, there is increased temperature that causes all these problems of kind of destroying some part of the wheat. And wheat associated or fiber associated medical problems are IBS related symptoms, early satiety, bloating, change in stool, decreased absorption of minerals we talked about, and excessive salt and fatty acids from actual fermentation of this fiber in the colon that can cause the problem. The last two are phytic acid or phytates. I think everybody knows about phytate in the wheat or any fiber that will kind of interfere with digestion and absorption of the nutrient. Inulin or the fructans that are in the fiber that will cause inflammation. So all the disorders associated with the chronic inflammation may have something to do with amount of inulin or the fructans. And being high fiber also kind of consider high actual FODMAP group of actual nutrients that can cause IBS related problem. I'm going to stop here and I will go to the next speaker. And, okay, one question.
If you are feeding about other grains, and second, pulses also have lectin. What is your recommendation?
Okay, so all the grains have lectins in a kind of different amounts. But the important part of that lectin is that how much it correlates to other antigen. There are many different types of lectins. So many grains will have that lectin. We don't know. We know about wheat more because of celiac disease, that all these other agglutinins are identified, but not all the grains lectins that have been identified, but all have lectins. So it may be a stimulus for or initial what you call actually the trigger to start that autoimmune process. So it may be the one that if you remove it, may not still take away that autoimmunity. But we know that symptoms will get better if you kind of remove that lectin. Yeah. Yes. Wheat can, or the gluten can cause cardiomyopathy. It can cause myocarditis. I didn't say that, but yes, it does. Probiotics is important is how much of other things other than the gluten is kind of responsible. Starch that is not digested, or if you have fiber that's a problem, then it can alter the GI tract microbiota. We think that intestinal infection may be the trigger in the sense of making the intestine more permeable. That starts the celiac disease or the gluten entry into the epithelium. So, in fact, probiotics do not stop that. But probiotic help the symptoms related to kind of actually fermented carbohydrates. Or last question.
The whole world loves and eats wheat. How can we make it safer? Do you have any comments on how can we safely use wheat?
Okay, so the first thing is how can we make wheat safer? So one thing is go back to the white wheat and don't use the wheat. So if you want to eat wheat that is less antigenic, then you go to the wild type of wheat. There are no more wild type of wheat that are grown. So you go to the Khapli wheat that we talked about first. That one is still tetraploid but in wild. The second thing is you use the wheat that is whole grain. The fiber is still there and not removed, so no flour. Flour is the problem. So because the wheat, actually fiber makes things little less quick to be digested. And the third is, there are a lot of things, but when you kind of introduce wheat in child's diet, that may be important to allow them to become actually tolerant to the gluten. Okay, all right. I'm going to introduce our next speaker.